The morning sun cast long shadows across Bagram Airfield as Captain Sarah Shark Mitchell walked her pre-flight inspection around the weathered A-10 Thunderbolt II. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she checked each control surface, her trained eyes scanning for any signs of damage or wear. The aircraft bore the scars of countless missions over Afghanistan, its titanium bathtub scarred but unbroken, its twin engines ready for another day of close air support. Sarah had been flying the Warthog for 3 years now, and this particular aircraft had become more than just a machine to her. Tail number 810962 had brought her home safely from 47 combat missions. The ground crew called her Iron Lady for her ability to absorb punishment and keep flying. Sarah just called her beautiful. Mitchell. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez jogged across the flight line, clipboard in hand. Colonel wants to see you in ops before you take off. Sarah frowned. Her mission brief had been straightforward: provide close air support for a convoy moving through the Korangal Valley. The area had been quiet lately, but quiet in Afghanistan often meant the enemy was planning something bigger. Did he say what for? She asked, pulling her helmet from the cockpit. Negative, ma'am. Just said to hustle. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the operations center facing Colonel James Harrison, a veteran fighter pilot who had transitioned to commanding the Joint Air Operations. Behind him, a large screen displayed a map of eastern Afghanistan with several red markers indicating areas of enemy activity. Mitchell, I'm pulling you off the convoy support mission, Harrison said without preamble. We've got a situation developing near FOB Chapman. Intelligence suggests a major Taliban offensive is building, and we need eyes on target. Sarah nodded. What's the threat assessment? Hi. We're talking coordinated attacks on multiple forward operating bases. The enemy has been moving fighters and equipment into position for weeks. Your job is to conduct reconnaissance over the suspected staging areas and report back. If you encounter targets of opportunity, you're cleared to engage. Harrison handed her a folder with updated intelligence reports. Sarah, I'm going to be straight with you. This one feels different. The chatter we're picking up suggests they're planning something big, possibly coordinated with insider attacks at the bases. As Sarah reviewed the mission parameters, she noticed something unusual. Sir, why isn't this going to the F-16s or F-15s? This seems like it might require speed and altitude. Harrison's expression grew serious. Because if our intelligence is right, our people on the ground are going to need someone who can stay in the fight. Someone who can take damage and keep flying. Someone who can put ordnance exactly where it needs to go without worrying about collateral damage. Sarah understood. The A-10 had been designed for exactly this type of mission. While other aircraft were faster and more advanced, nothing could provide the sustained, accurate close air support that the Warthog delivered. When soldiers were in trouble, they didn't call for the fastest jet or the most high-tech aircraft. They called for the A-10. An hour later, Sarah was airborne, the familiar rumble of the twin turbofan engines providing a comforting backdrop as she climbed toward her patrol area. The landscape below looked deceptively peaceful, with small villages dotting the valleys between towering mountain peaks. But Sarah knew that appearance was deceiving. Down there, men with rifles and rocket-propelled grenades were moving into position, planning attacks that could cost American lives. She checked her weapons systems. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon was loaded with 1,174 rounds of 30mm ammunition. Under her wings, she carried a mixed load of AGM-65 Maverick missiles and Mark 82 bombs. It was enough firepower to level a small town, but Sarah hoped she wouldn't need to use most of it. The first 2 hours of her patrol passed quietly. Sarah flew a systematic pattern over the suspected enemy staging areas, using her targeting pod to record potential threats for later analysis. She spotted several groups of men moving through the mountains, but nothing that definitively identified them as enemy combatants. Then, her radio crackled to life. Hog 27, this is Overlord. We're showing increased radio chatter in your area. Recommend you investigate grid coordinates 347 to 892. Sarah banked toward the new coordinates, her eyes scanning the terrain below. The area was a complex of caves and rocky outcroppings that provided perfect concealment for enemy fighters. As she approached, movement caught her eye. Below, she could see men in traditional Afghan clothing moving equipment into cave entrances. Even at altitude, Sarah could make out the distinctive shapes of mortar tubes and ammunition crates. This wasn't a wedding party or farmers going about their daily business. This was an enemy position being prepared for attack. Overlord, Hog 27. I have eyes on enemy activity at the coordinates you provided. Count approximately 20 military-age males moving weapons and equipment into concealed positions. Request permission to engage. Hog 27, you are cleared hot. Repeat, you are cleared to engage. Sarah rolled into her attack run, the nose of her A-10 pointing down toward the target area. She could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline as she lined up her shot. The GAU-8 cannon was designed for exactly this type of target, enemy personnel in the open with minimal risk to civilians. The gun run lasted only 3 seconds, but, in that time, the Avenger cannon fired 180 rounds of 30mm high-explosive ammunition. The effect on the target area was devastating. When the smoke cleared, the enemy position had been eliminated. But, as Sarah pulled up from her attack, tracer fire streaked past her cockpit. The enemy had learned from previous encounters with A-10s, and they had positioned anti-aircraft guns in concealed positions around the valley. Sarah felt the aircraft shudder as rounds impacted the armored titanium bathtub that surrounded her cockpit. Warning lights began flashing on her instrument panel, but the engines continued to run smoothly. This was exactly the scenario the A-10 had been designed for, absorbing enemy fire while continuing to fight. Overlord, Hog 27 taking effective fire from multiple positions. I've got damage to the aircraft, but engines are good. Continuing to engage. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah fought a running battle against the entrenched enemy positions. She made multiple gun runs, using the terrain to mask her approach and minimize her exposure to enemy fire. Each time she attacked, more tracer fire reached up toward her aircraft. Each time, the A-10 absorbed the punishment and kept flying. During her final attack run, Sarah targeted what appeared to be a command position dug into a hillside. As she lined up the shot, a surface-to-air missile streaked past her aircraft, missing by mere feet. The enemy had brought heavy weapons to this fight, weapons that could threaten even the heavily armored A-10. Sarah completed her attack, watching as her 30mm rounds tore into the enemy position. Secondary explosions indicated she had hit an ammunition storage area. The hillside erupted in a series of blasts that echoed across the valley. But, as she pulled up from the attack, Sarah felt a massive impact against the left side of her aircraft. The A-10 rolled violently to the right, and she had to fight to maintain control. Her left engine was on fire, and multiple warning lights were now illuminated across her instrument panel. Overlord, Hog 27. I've taken a hit to the left engine and have fire warnings. Attempting to return to base. The voice that came back over the radio was tense but professional. Hog 27, understand you have battle damage. We're scrambling the rescue bird and alerting medical. What's your status? Sarah quickly assessed her aircraft. The left engine was clearly damaged and running rough, but it was still producing some power. Her flight controls felt sluggish but responsive. Most importantly, the titanium bathtub had protected her from the worst of the enemy fire. She was hurt but not critically wounded. Overlord, left engine damaged but running. Flight controls responding. I can make it home, but I'm going to need priority handling and emergency equipment standing by. As Sarah began her return to Bagram, she reflected on the mission. The enemy had been well positioned and well armed, but the A-10 had done its job. The staging area had been destroyed, and the planned attacks on American bases had been disrupted. It had cost her aircraft significant damage, but that was exactly what the Warthog had been designed for. The flight back to Bagram took 45 minutes, with Sarah nursing the damaged engine and monitoring her aircraft systems. As she approached the airfield, she could see emergency vehicles lined up along the runway, their lights flashing in the afternoon sun. The landing was rougher than usual, but the A-10 touched down safely and rolled to a stop. As Sarah shut down the engines, she could hear the sound of approaching fire trucks and ambulances. But she was alive, and her aircraft had brought her home once again. As the ground crew surrounded her aircraft to assess the damage, Sarah realized that tail number 810962 had just added another chapter to her combat history. Tomorrow, the maintainers would patch the holes, replace the damaged components, and prepare Iron Lady for her next mission. Because that's what A-10s did, they absorbed punishment, completed their missions, and came home. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that today's mission was just the beginning of something much larger. The enemy had been too well prepared, too well positioned. This felt like a prelude to a larger offensive, one that would test both her skills as a pilot and the legendary toughness of the aircraft that had brought her safely through another day of combat. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the maintenance hangar watching the crew chiefs work on her damaged A-10. Chief Master Sergeant Williams, a 20-year veteran who had maintained aircraft from the Gulf War through Afghanistan, supervised the repairs with the precision of a surgeon and the vocabulary of a sailor. "She took 7 hits to the left side," Williams explained, pointing to the patched holes in the aircraft's skin. 3 rounds went through the wing, 2 more through the vertical stabilizer, and this big one here went right through the left engine nacelle. Any other aircraft would have been smoking crater, but your girl kept flying. Sarah ran her hand along the repaired sections, feeling the smooth patches where new metal had been welded into place. The damage was extensive, but the A-10's design had channeled the worst of it away from critical flight systems. The redundant controls, separated by the titanium bathtub, had kept her in the air when other aircraft would have fallen. "How long until she's ready to fly?" Sarah asked. Williams consulted his clipboard. "Engine replacement should be complete by tomorrow morning. We're doing a complete inspection of all flight systems, checking hydraulics, and replacing damaged wiring. She'll be ready for a test flight by 1400 hours." As Sarah left the hangar, her squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Viper Chen, intercepted her near the flight operations building. Chen had flown A-10s in Iraq and understood the unique bond between Warthog pilots and their aircraft. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about your next assignment," Chen said, gesturing toward her office. "Intelligence has confirmed that the staging area you hit was part of a larger offensive plan. The enemy has been planning coordinated attacks on 3 forward operating bases, timed to occur during a major supply convoy operation." Inside the operations center, Chen spread out a map showing the affected region. Red circles indicated enemy positions, while blue markers showed friendly forces. The tactical situation was complex, with American and coalition forces spread across a wide area. "The convoy operation is scheduled for day after tomorrow," Chen continued. 30 vehicles carrying supplies and rotating personnel to FOB Shank, FOB Salerno, and FOB Chapman. Intelligence believes the enemy plans to hit the convoy while simultaneously attacking the bases. Sarah studied the map. "That's a lot of ground to cover. What assets do we have available?" "That's where it gets interesting," Chen said. "We've got a mixed package assigned to this operation. 2 F-16s from the 555th Fighter Squadron will provide high-altitude patrol and rapid response. Your A-10 will handle close air support for the convoy and any ground forces that get into trouble." The mention of F-16 pilots made Sarah smile slightly. Fighter jocks and A-10 pilots had a long-standing rivalry that was part professional disagreement and part friendly competition. The fast-moving F-16s were designed for air-to-air combat and precision strikes, while the A-10 was built for close air support and battlefield survivability. Both aircraft had their place in modern warfare, but their pilots rarely agreed on which was more important. "Who are the F-16 pilots?" Sarah asked. "Captain Mike Falcon Rodriguez and Captain Jennifer Jazz Thompson. Both are good pilots, but they're coming from different backgrounds. Rodriguez did 2 tours flying interdiction missions over Syria, and Thompson has been flying Homeland Defense out of Portland. This will be Thompson's first combat deployment." Sarah nodded. Working with fighter pilots always required coordination and mutual respect. The A-10 flew low and slow compared to the F-16, but both aircraft would need to work together to protect the convoy and respond to multiple threats simultaneously. The next morning, Sarah completed her test flight of the repaired A-10. Chief Williams had been right about the quality of the repairs. The aircraft flew as smoothly as it had before the damage, with all systems operating normally. The new left engine had been broken improperly and was producing full power. Iron Lady was ready for combat again. That afternoon, Sarah attended the mission briefing with the F-16 pilots. Captain Rodriguez was a compact man with the confident bearing of an experienced fighter pilot. He had flown 127 combat missions over Syria and Iraq, primarily conducting precision strikes against high-value targets. Captain Thompson was younger, with the focused intensity of a pilot eager to prove herself in combat. "The convoy will depart Bagram at 0600 hours, the intelligence officer briefed. Route of travel is Highway 1 through the Tangi Valley, then north toward the forward operating bases. Travel time is estimated at 8 hours with security stops and route checks. The briefing continued with detailed threat assessments, communication protocols, and coordination procedures. The enemy was expected to attack using improvised explosive devices, small arms fire, and, possibly rocket-propelled grenades. The terrain provided numerous ambush positions, and the convoy would be vulnerable during several portions of the route. Air support will be provided by 3 aircraft, the briefing officer continued. HOG 27 will maintain close air support orbit over the convoy. Falcon 11 and Falcon 12 will patrol at higher altitude and respond to specific threats as directed by ground commanders. After the formal briefing, the 3 pilots met privately to discuss coordination procedures. Rodriguez had worked with A-10s before and understood their capabilities and limitations. Thompson had trained with various aircraft types but had never operated in a multi-aircraft close air support environment. The key thing to remember, Sarah explained, is that we're operating in different altitude blocks and different speed ranges. The A-10 will be down low, slow, and working close to our guys on the ground. You'll be higher and faster, able to respond quickly to threats across a wide area. Rodriguez nodded. We've got Mavericks and DAMs if we need precision strikes. Your gun is better for troops in contact. Thompson looked concerned. What if we have multiple simultaneous threats? How do we deconflict without stepping on each other? Good question, Sarah said. The ground controller will manage target assignments and coordinate our attacks. If things get really busy, the A-10 handles close-in threats while the F-16s take the more distant targets. Communication is critical. The morning of the convoy operation dawned clear and cold. Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection as the sun rose over the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink. The convoy vehicles were already forming up at the departure point, 30 heavily armored trucks loaded with supplies and personnel. As Sarah taxied toward the active runway, she could see the 2 F-16s beginning their own pre-flight procedures. The Fighting Falcons looked sleek and deadly next to the blunt, businesslike appearance of the A-10. Both aircraft were instruments of war, but they represented different philosophies of air power. Takeoff was routine, and Sarah quickly established contact with the ground controller managing the convoy operation. The 3 aircraft took up their assigned positions, the F-16s at 15,000 feet providing area coverage, and Sarah's A-10 at 8,000 feet directly over the convoy route. For the first 3 hours, the mission proceeded smoothly. The convoy maintained good speed through relatively secure areas, and the air support aircraft saw no signs of enemy activity. Sarah used the time to familiarize herself with the route and identify potential threat positions. Then, as the convoy entered the Tangi Valley, everything changed. All aircraft, this is Convoy 6. We have IED detonation at the head of the convoy. Lead vehicle is disabled. We're taking small arms fire from multiple positions along the ridgeline. Sarah immediately began scanning the area for enemy positions. The valley was narrow, with steep sides that provided perfect concealment for attackers. She could see muzzle flashes from several locations along the ridge, indicating a well-coordinated ambush. HOG 27 has eyes on enemy positions along the eastern ridgeline. Count 6 to 8 fighting positions with small arms fire. Request permission to engage. HOG 27, you are cleared to engage. Convoy is stopped and taking cover behind disabled vehicle. Sarah rolled into her attack, diving toward the ridgeline where enemy fighters were firing down at the convoy. The GAU-8 cannon spoke with its distinctive sound, like a giant zipper being opened and closed. Her first burst caught 3 enemy positions, silencing the guns and sending fighters scrambling for better cover. But, as Sarah pulled up from her attack run, she heard Captain Rodriguez's voice over the radio. HOG 27, be advised we have multiple enemy reinforcements moving toward your position from the north. Estimate 24 fighters with heavy weapons including what appears to be anti-aircraft guns. This was exactly the scenario intelligence had predicted, a complex ambush designed to trap the convoy and shoot down supporting aircraft. The enemy had learned from previous encounters and was prepared for American air power. Falcon 11, can you engage the reinforcements? Sarah asked. Negative, HOG. Too close to friendly positions for JDAM, and we don't have a clear shot with Mavericks. Recommend you continue close air support while we try to find a clean shot. Sarah realized she was going to have to fight through the entire enemy force alone while keeping them away from the convoy. The A-10 was designed for exactly this type of mission, but it would test both her skills and her aircraft's legendary toughness. She banked hard to the right and lined up for another gun run, this time targeting the approaching reinforcements. As she dove toward the target, tracer fire began reaching up toward her aircraft from multiple positions. The enemy had anticipated her tactics and positioned anti-aircraft weapons to cover their fighters' advance. The next 20 minutes tested every aspect of Sarah's training and her aircraft's design. She made repeated attacks against enemy positions, using the terrain to mask her approach and minimize her exposure to defensive fire. Each attack run drew more anti-aircraft fire, and she could hear the distinctive sound of rounds hitting her aircraft's armored skin. During her sixth attack run, a burst of heavy machine gun fire caught her A-10 as she pulled up from the target. Warning lights illuminated across her instrument panel, and she could feel vibration through the control stick. But the engines continued to run smoothly, and the aircraft responded to her control inputs. The battle continued for another hour, with Sarah providing continuous close air support while the F-16s worked to eliminate enemy positions that were too far from the convoy for safe engagement by the A-10. Gradually, the volume of enemy fire decreased as their positions were destroyed or abandoned. When the shooting finally stopped, the convoy was able to recover the damaged vehicle and continue its mission. Sarah's fuel was running low, and her aircraft had absorbed significant battle damage, but she had accomplished her mission. The convoy would reach its destination safely, and the planned enemy offensive had been disrupted. As Sarah approached Bagram Airfield for landing, she could see the emergency vehicles already positioned along the runway. Her A-10 had taken even more damage during the convoy battle than during her previous mission, and several warning lights continued to flash on her instrument panel. But Iron Lady was still flying, her engines running smoothly despite the punishment they had absorbed. Tower, Hog 27 requesting priority landing. I have battle damage and need emergency equipment standing by, Sarah transmitted. Hog 27, you are cleared for priority approach runway 09. Emergency equipment is in position. Wind 010 at 8 knots. The landing was harder than usual, with the damaged flight controls requiring more effort to maintain proper approach speed and attitude. But the A-10 touched down safely and rolled to a stop near the emergency vehicles. As Sarah shut down the engines, she could hear the ground crew already beginning their assessment of the damage. Captain Rodriguez's F-16 landed 10 minutes later, followed by Captain Thompson. Both pilots taxied to the ramp and began their post-flight procedures. The debrief would be extensive, covering every aspect of the mission and the coordination between the three aircraft. Chief Williams approached Sarah's aircraft as she climbed down from the cockpit, his expression a mixture of professional concern and grudging admiration for the A-10's toughness. "Ma'am, I count 14 new holes in this aircraft," he said, walking around the damaged Warthog. "Both engines took hits, you've got hydraulic leaks, electrical damage, and what looks like structural damage to the left wing root. Any other aircraft would be in pieces right now." Sarah followed Williams as he pointed out each area of damage. The enemy had concentrated their fire on her aircraft during the prolonged battle, and the A-10 had absorbed an incredible amount of punishment. But the redundant systems and armored design had protected the critical components and kept her airborne. "How long for repairs this time?" Sarah asked. Williams consulted with his assistants before answering. "This is major damage, Captain. We're talking about replacing both engines, repairing hydraulic lines, rewiring electrical systems, and possibly replacing structural components. I'd estimate 4 to 5 days minimum." An hour later, Sarah sat in the debriefing room with the two F-16 pilots and their squadron commanders. The mission had been successful, but it had highlighted both the strengths and limitations of mixed aircraft operations in complex combat environments. The convoy reached all three forward operating bases safely, Lieutenant Colonel Chen reported. Enemy casualties are estimated at 45 fighters killed or wounded, with significant equipment destroyed. Intelligence believes we disrupted a major offensive that could have resulted in hundreds of coalition casualties. Captain Rodriguez spoke up. The coordination worked well overall, but we had some challenges with communication and target deconfliction. When things got intense, it was difficult to maintain situational awareness of where everyone was operating. Captain Thompson nodded in agreement. "I learned a lot about close air support operations today." The A-10's ability to operate in that threat environment was impressive. "We would have had difficulty providing the same level of support from our altitude and speed." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement from the F-16 pilots. The mixed package concept works, but it requires extensive practice and clear communication protocols. Each aircraft type has specific capabilities that complement the others. Lieutenant Colonel Chen took notes as the pilots discussed lessons learned and recommendations for future operations. We're going to be conducting more mixed operations as the tactical situation evolves. The enemy is adapting their tactics, and we need to be able to respond with the right combination of assets. The formal debrief concluded with action items and recommendations for improving coordination between A-10s and F-16s in similar missions. But, as the pilots prepared to leave, Captain Thompson approached Sarah privately. "Can I ask you something?" Thompson said. "How do you handle flying into that kind of defensive fire? Today was my first time in a real combat situation, and watching you make those repeated gun runs while taking fire was incredible." Sarah considered the question carefully. It was a fair question from a pilot who was still learning about combat flying, and it deserved an honest answer. "The A-10 changes how you think about combat," Sarah explained. "In other aircraft, taking fire means breaking off the attack and trying a different approach. In the Warthog, you know the aircraft can absorb hits and keep flying, so you focus on completing the mission rather than avoiding the threat." Thompson looked thoughtful. "Doesn't that worry you? Flying an aircraft that's designed to take damage?" "Actually, it's the opposite," Sarah said. "Knowing that your aircraft can survive hits and bring you home allows you to focus on helping the guys on the ground. When soldiers are under fire, they need someone who can stay in the fight until the threat is eliminated." Over the next 4 days, Sarah watched her aircraft undergo extensive repairs. The damage from the convoy mission was more serious than initially assessed, requiring replacement of both engines and major structural work on the left wing. The maintainers worked around the clock to restore Iron Lady to flight status. On the third day of repairs, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. General Patricia Morrison, the commanding general of air operations in Afghanistan, toured the maintenance facility and specifically requested to see the damaged A-10. "Captain Mitchell, I've been reading the mission reports from your recent combat operations," General Morrison said as they walked around the aircraft. "Your performance has been exemplary, but I'm concerned about the cumulative damage your aircraft has sustained." Sarah wasn't sure how to respond. "Ma'am, the A-10 is designed to absorb battle damage and continue flying." "That's exactly what she's been doing." General Morrison nodded. "I understand that, Captain. But I'm looking at the broader picture. Your aircraft has sustained major damage twice in 1 week. The maintenance requirements are significant, and we're limited in our spare parts and repair capabilities." "Are you suggesting that A-10 operations are too costly, ma'am?" "Not at all," the general replied quickly. "I'm suggesting that your particular aircraft has been through more than most. I want you to consider transitioning to a different A-10 when the repairs are complete. Tail number 810962 has earned a rest." Sarah felt a surge of emotion that surprised her. The idea of flying a different aircraft felt like abandoning a trusted friend. Iron Lady had brought her through 49 combat missions, including some of the most dangerous situations she had ever faced. The aircraft had saved her life multiple times through its legendary toughness and reliability. "Ma'am, respectfully, I'd prefer to continue flying this aircraft if she's deemed airworthy," Sarah said. "We've been through a lot together, and I understand her capabilities and limitations better than any other A-10 in the squadron." General Morrison smiled. "I thought you might say that." "Very well, Captain. But I want you to know that we're watching the cumulative stress on both the aircraft and the pilot. Don't let pride or sentiment override good judgment." That afternoon, Sarah received word that the repairs were nearly complete. Chief Williams had personally supervised the installation of the new engines and had conducted extensive tests of all aircraft systems. Iron Lady would be ready for a test flight the following morning. As Sarah walked through the maintenance hangar that evening, she encountered the 2 F-16 pilots who had flown with her during the convoy mission. Captain Rodriguez was reviewing technical manuals related to close air support procedures, while Captain Thompson was studying combat tactics used by A-10 pilots. "Preparing for the next mission?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez looked up from his manual. "Actually, we're trying to understand A-10 operations better. The way you handled that convoy mission got us thinking about the differences between our aircraft and the capabilities we each bring to the fight." Thompson added, "I've been reading about the A-10's design philosophy and combat history. The concept of building an aircraft specifically for close air support and survivability is fascinating. Most modern fighters are designed for speed and versatility. The A-10 is definitely unique, Sarah agreed. She's not the fastest or the most high-tech, but when soldiers are in trouble, there's nothing else they'd rather see overhead. The conversation continued for another hour, covering topics ranging from aircraft design philosophy to combat tactics and mission planning. Sarah found herself appreciating the professional curiosity of the F-16 pilots and their willingness to learn about different approaches to air combat. "We've been thinking," Rodriguez said as the conversation wound down. "What if we practiced some coordinated missions? Mixed formations, integrated tactics, that sort of thing. We could probably learn from each other." Sarah was intrigued by the suggestion. That could be valuable. The A-10 and F-16 have complementary capabilities that could work well together with the right tactics and procedures. Thompson nodded enthusiastically. "I'd like to understand how to provide better support for close air support missions. Today I felt like I was just watching most of the time because I didn't know how to safely integrate with your operations." They agreed to propose joint training missions to their squadron commanders. The success of the convoy mission had demonstrated the value of mixed aircraft operations, but it had also revealed areas where better coordination could improve effectiveness and safety. The next morning, Sarah conducted her test flight of the repaired A-10. Chief Williams had been right about the quality of the repairs. The aircraft flew perfectly, with all systems operating normally and both engines producing full power. Iron Lady was ready for combat again. As Sarah landed from the test flight, she felt a sense of completion. The aircraft had been restored to full capability, and she had gained new respect from pilots flying different aircraft types. But, more importantly, she had proven that the A-10's unique design and mission remained relevant in modern combat operations. That evening, Sarah received notification of her next mission assignment. Intelligence had identified another enemy staging area, this one located in a valley system that provided natural concealment and multiple escape routes. The mission would require coordination with ground forces and close air support in a complex terrain environment. But, this time, she wouldn't be flying alone. The mission would include 2 F-16s flying coordinated support, and the ground forces would include forward air controllers specifically trained in multi-aircraft coordination. The lessons learned from the convoy mission were already being applied to improve future operations. As Sarah reviewed the mission briefing materials, she reflected on the events of the past week. Iron Lady had once again proven the value of the A-10's design philosophy, an aircraft that could absorb punishment, deliver precise firepower, and bring its pilot home safely. But, equally important, she had discovered that cooperation between different aircraft types could create capabilities that exceeded the sum of their individual contributions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate the unique value of close air support in protecting American forces. Sarah was confident that Iron Lady was ready for whatever came next. 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself preparing for what intelligence called the most significant air-ground operation of her deployment. The mission involved multiple aircraft types, ground forces from 3 different units, and coordination with special operations teams already positioned in enemy territory. The target was a heavily fortified enemy compound that served as a regional command center for Taliban operations across eastern Afghanistan. The morning briefing took place in the main operations center, with representatives from Army Special Forces, conventional ground units, Air Force fighter squadrons, and helicopter units. The complexity of the operation required precise timing and coordination between all participants. The target compound is located in a valley system 30 kilometers northeast of FOB Shank, the intelligence officer briefed. Surveillance indicates approximately 60 enemy fighters with heavy weapons, including anti-aircraft guns and, possibly surface-to-air missiles. The facility serves as a command center, weapons depot, and training facility. Colonel Harrison outlined the air support package. "We'll have 4 A-10s providing close air support, 6 F-16s conducting precision strikes and air cover, 2 AC-130 gunships for sustained fire support, and Apache helicopters for escort and close-in attack. This is the largest coordinated air operation we've conducted this year." Sarah's role was to lead the A-10 formation, with 3 other Warthog pilots flying in coordination with her aircraft. The F-16 element would include Captains Rodriguez and Thompson, now experienced in working with A-10s after their previous missions together. The complexity of the operation required everyone to understand their specific responsibilities and how they fit into the larger plan. The ground assault will commence at 0530 hours, the operations officer continued. Air support will begin 15 minutes earlier with precision strikes on the compound's outer defenses. A-10s will provide close air support throughout the ground assault, while F-16s maintain air superiority and respond to specific threats. After the main briefing, the pilots met separately to discuss air-to-air coordination and communication procedures. The number of aircraft involved created potential for confusion and conflicts, especially in the confined airspace over the target area. Captain Rodriguez had been designated as the overall air coordinator for the mission, a role that required him to manage multiple aircraft types while maintaining awareness of ground force positions and requirements. The key to this working is communication and discipline, he emphasized. Everyone stays in their assigned areas unless specifically directed otherwise. Sarah appreciated Rodriguez's professional approach to the coordination challenge. Over the past weeks, the F-16 and A-10 pilots had developed mutual respect through training missions and shared combat experiences. The A-10 formation will operate in the lower altitude block, focusing on targets designated by ground controllers. F-16s will handle targets outside the close air support zone and provide overwatch for threats we can't see. Captain Thompson had matured considerably during her combat deployment, gaining confidence and expertise through challenging missions. What concerns me is the anti-aircraft threat. Intelligence suggests they have weapons specifically positioned to engage low-flying aircraft like the A-10s. That's always a concern, Sarah acknowledged. But the A-10 is designed to operate in that threat environment. Our job is to neutralize those weapons quickly before they can engage multiple aircraft. The compound layout provides some concealment, but it also limits their fields of fire. The mission launched before dawn, with all aircraft departing from different bases to arrive over the target area simultaneously. Sarah led her formation of 4 A-10s through the pre-dawn darkness, navigating by instruments and GPS coordinates toward the target valley. The weight of responsibility felt heavy as she considered the complexity of the upcoming battle. As the formation approached the target area, Sarah could see the lights of the enemy compound below. Intelligence had been accurate about the facility's size and apparent importance. Multiple buildings were visible within a fortified perimeter, and defensive positions were scattered throughout the surrounding terrain. All aircraft, this is Overlord. Ground forces are in position and ready to commence assault. Airstrikes are cleared hot on designated targets. Execute, execute, execute. The coordinated attack began with precision strikes from the F-16s, targeting specific buildings identified as command centers and weapons storage areas. Sarah watched as guided bombs impacted their targets with devastating accuracy, sending massive fireballs into the night sky. The initial strikes were designed to eliminate the compound's command structure and heavy weapons before ground forces began their assault. 60 seconds after the F-16 strikes, Sarah led her A-10 formation into the target area to begin close air support operations. Ground forces were already moving toward the compound perimeter, and enemy resistance was beginning to organize in response to the surprise attack. Hogflight, this is Groundhog 6. We're taking fire from defensive positions along the northern perimeter. Request immediate support on targets I'm marking now. Sarah could see the infrared markers being placed by the ground controller, indicating enemy positions that were engaging advancing troops. The targets were perfect for A-10 gun runs, clearly defined, away from friendly forces, and requiring precision rather than massive destruction. Groundhog 6, Hogflight lead. I have eyes on your markers. Rolling in hot. Sarah's first gun run targeted a machine gun position that was firing on advancing soldiers. The GAU-8 cannon delivered 150 rounds in a 3-second burst, eliminating the threat and allowing ground forces to advance. Behind her, the other A-10 pilots engaged additional targets along the compound's defensive perimeter. But, as Sarah pulled up from her attack run, tracer fire erupted from multiple positions throughout the target area. The enemy had anticipated air attacks and positioned anti-aircraft weapons in concealed locations around the compound. The defensive fire was more intense than intelligence had predicted. All aircraft, be advised we have heavy anti-aircraft fire from multiple positions. ZSU-23 and heavy machine guns confirmed, Rodriguez transmitted from his F-16 at higher altitude. Sarah felt familiar impacts against her aircraft's armored skin as she maneuvered away from the concentrated defensive fire. Iron Lady shuddered under the impacts but continued flying smoothly. The A-10's legendary toughness was being tested once again. Falcon Flight, can you engage the anti-aircraft positions? Sarah requested. Working the problem now, Hog lead. We're identifying targets and preparing precision strikes, Rodriguez responded. For the next 20 minutes, the air battle raged over the compound as ground forces fought their way through the outer defenses. The A-10s provided continuous close air support, engaging enemy positions as they were identified by ground controllers. The F-16s worked to eliminate anti-aircraft threats and provide precision strikes on specific buildings within the compound. During Sarah's fifth gun run, a surface-to-air missile streaked past her aircraft, missing by less than 50 feet. The enemy had revealed their most dangerous weapon, one capable of shooting down even the heavily armored A-10. But the missile launch had also revealed the position of the enemy air defense system. Falcon 1-1, I have the SAM site located. Grid coordinates 123 to 456. Request immediate strike, Sarah transmitted while maneuvering to avoid additional missiles. Hog lead, Falcon 1-1. Target identified. JDAM is away. The guided bomb struck the missile site 30 seconds later, eliminating the most serious threat to the attacking aircraft. But the battle was far from over, as enemy fighters continued to resist from positions throughout the compound and surrounding terrain. As dawn broke over the battlefield, the intensity of the fighting began to decrease. Ground forces had penetrated the compound's outer defenses and were systematically clearing buildings and bunker complexes. The air support aircraft had eliminated most of the heavy weapons and defensive positions that could threaten the advancing troops. All aircraft, this is Groundhog 6. Compound is secure. We are conducting final clearance operations and damage assessment. Outstanding work by all air support elements. Sarah felt a surge of relief and satisfaction as she heard the ground commander's transmission. The mission had been successful, with minimal friendly casualties and the complete destruction of a major enemy facility. The coordination between multiple aircraft types had worked exactly as planned, with each element contributing its specific capabilities to the overall success. But, as Sarah began her return to Bagram, she noticed that her aircraft was flying differently than usual. The impacts from enemy anti-aircraft fire had caused more damage than she initially realized. Her left engine was running rough, and several warning lights were illuminated on her instrument panel. Overlord, Hog 27. I have battle damage and need priority handling for landing. Left engine running rough and multiple warning lights. Hog 27, you're cleared for priority approach. Emergency equipment will be standing by. The flight back to Bagram took 40 minutes, with Sarah carefully monitoring her damaged engine and adjusting her power settings to maintain safe flight. As she approached the airfield, she could see the familiar sight of emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, their lights flashing in the morning sun. The landing was successful, but as Sarah taxied toward the parking area, her left engine finally gave up completely, trailing smoke and grinding to a halt. Iron Lady had once again brought her pilot home safely despite significant battle damage, but the aircraft would need extensive repairs before flying again. As Sarah shut down the remaining engine and climbed out of the cockpit, she was met by Chief Williams and his maintenance crew. Their expressions showed the familiar mixture of concern and professional pride that came from working on the legendary tough aircraft. Captain, I count 19 hits on this aircraft, Williams reported after a preliminary inspection. Left engine is completely shot, you've got hydraulic damage, electrical problems, and structural damage to the empennage. She took a beating but kept flying. Sarah walked around her damaged aircraft, assessing the extent of the battle damage. The enemy had concentrated significant firepower on her A-10 during the prolonged engagement, but the aircraft's redundant systems and armored design had protected her throughout the mission. Captain Rodriguez approached as Sarah completed her damage assessment. Incredible flying today, he said. The way you kept making gun runs while taking that kind of defensive fire was impressive. I don't think any other aircraft could have stayed in that fight. The A-10 makes it possible, Sarah replied. Knowing that your aircraft can absorb hits and keep flying allows you to focus on the mission rather than self-preservation. Captain Thompson joined the conversation, her respect for A-10 operations clearly evident. I learned a lot watching you work today. The coordination between our aircraft types worked better than I expected. We each contributed different capabilities that made the overall mission more effective. The success of the large-scale coordinated operation had demonstrated the value of integrating different aircraft types in complex combat situations. The A-10s had provided sustained close air support that enabled ground forces to advance against heavy resistance, while the F-16s had eliminated high-value targets and air defense threats that were beyond the reach of the lower-flying Warthogs. Later that day, Sarah attended the mission debrief with all participating aircrews and ground commanders. The operation had been a complete success, with the enemy command facility destroyed and significant disruption to Taliban operations across the region. More importantly, friendly casualties had been minimal due to effective air support and coordination. This mission demonstrates the value of joint operations and integrated air support, Colonel Harrison summarized. Each aircraft type contributed specific capabilities that enhanced the overall effectiveness of the operation. The coordination between A-10s and F-16s was particularly noteworthy. General Morrison, who had observed the operation from the command center, addressed the assembled crews. Today's mission will serve as a model for future operations. The enemy is adapting their tactics, and we must respond with coordinated capabilities that exceed the sum of individual contributions. As the debrief concluded, Sarah reflected on the mission and its implications for her remaining deployment. Iron Lady would require extensive repairs, possibly taking weeks to restore to flight status. But the aircraft had once again proven the value of the A-10's unique design and mission. That evening, Sarah visited the maintenance hangar where Chief Williams and his crew were beginning their assessment of the battle damage. The extent of the damage was even more serious than initially apparent, with critical systems affected by enemy fire. "How long this time, Chief?" Sarah asked. Williams consulted his damage assessment checklist before answering. "This is major structural damage, Captain. We're talking about engine replacement, hydraulic system rebuilding, electrical rewiring, and possible replacement of damaged flight control components. I'd estimate 2 to 3 weeks minimum." As Sarah prepared to leave the hangar, she took one last look at Iron Lady. Tail number 810962 had now completed 52 combat missions, surviving encounters that would have destroyed lesser aircraft. The A-10 had earned its reputation through exactly this type of performance, absorbing punishment, completing missions, and bringing pilots home safely. The aircraft would fly again, Sarah was certain of that. Chief Williams and his crew would work their magic, replacing damaged components and restoring Iron Lady to full flight status. And, when that happened, Sarah would be ready for whatever mission came next. But, as she walked away from the hangar, Sarah realized that something had changed during the mission. The successful coordination with F-16 pilots had shown her that different aircraft types could work together more effectively than she had previously believed. The A-10's unique capabilities remained essential, but they were enhanced when properly integrated with other assets. The tail number that had initially drawn curious looks from F-16 pilots now commanded their respect. Iron Lady had proven that the old Warthog still had an important role to play in modern combat operations, even as warfare continued to evolve and change. And that respect had been earned through exactly what the A-10 did best, staying in the fight until the mission was complete.